Hello and welcome to my YouTube channel. Julie here. Today I'm going to be creating a art journal page, I suppose, on the cover of a book that I'm going to use for keeping my hints and tips and quotes and things like that that I pick up around social media that I think I might want to use. I always write these things on a scrap of paper and end up losing them, so I've decided to get myself a book and use that book for keeping all of those things in. I bought this book at Typo and I don't really like the cover, so because it's spiral bound, I was able to disconnect the cover and work on that without affecting the rest of the book. So I just pulled the spiral apart a fraction and pulled the cover out. First stage was to apply 2 good coats of gesso, letting the gesso dry between each coat. I thought I might be able to get away with 1 coat, but 1 coat wasn't sufficient to cover the design that was already on the book. Now that my gesso's dry, I've gone with some sprays. I've decided to use Glimmer Mist in gold and pumpkin spice, and an artiste ink spray called Cardinal Red. I give it a coat of the lightest colour first, which is the gold, a yellow colour. Then I go with the orange and then the red. I give it a liberal coat so that it's nice and wet, and then I tear off a piece of cling wrap and lie it on top of the wet sprays and sort of scrunch it up. So that's what's going to create the pattern on the cover. So the more scrunches, the better the pattern will be. Once I've done that, I have to set that aside to dry. Normally I would set it aside to dry overnight, but because I'm in a hurry today, I've decided to just let it sit for, I think I let it sit for about 5 or 6 hours. After the drying time, I peeled the cling wrap off and it revealed a lovely pattern. The red had sort of accumulated into the grooves, and yeah, it was a nice background pattern. It was still a bit wet, so I had to be careful with it. I'm going to use this stamp to create my focal point, which is going to be circles. I use my stamping platform because this stamp doesn't stamp very well, and I'm using my jet black Stays On ink. I'm going to make about 4 or 5 of these patterns. To colour the circles, I'm going to use some Twinkling H2Os. To use these, you need to give each little pot a good spray with water, and then I'm going to use a water brush to actually apply the product to the circles. These are lovely colours. They have such a nice glimmer to them, and I use them quite often actually. The colours I'm using on the circles today are Pink Azalea, Fern, Ginger Peach, Snapdragon, Wild Blueberry, Solar Gold and Lemon Drop. When I apply the colour, I'm not real fussed about staying within the lines because I'm going to cut each of these circles out to use on my cover. So I have all of my circles there ready, but I decided that I wanted to add some more interest to the background, so I'm using this Kaisercraft grunge stencil, and I'm using gesso to go through it. I didn't actually realise when I started using it that it was gesso. I thought I was using texture paste, and the gesso is a bit thinner than the texture paste and doesn't hold its shape as well. I wanted some larger circles, so I used my Spellbinder's standard circle small nested die, and I cut 5 circles from just normal white cardstock. To add some interest to these circles, I used my Kazaz Life's Moment stamp, Kaiser Crafts Numbers stamp, and Deep Red Water Droplets stamp with some Stays On ink. Stays On ink will stay in place when I add the H2Os to it. I also used the same coloured H2Os as I used on the smaller circles. The gesso sort of blended into the background too much, took up a bit of the colour from the background, so I wanted something that was whiter and stood up better, so I decided to use this square stencil, very small squares. I can't remember what brand that is, I've thrown packaging away, and so I'm using modelling paste this time, which will hold its shape a bit better and hopefully stay a bit whiter. I applied that randomly on the cover. I think I put it in about 3 or 4 different areas. I use matte gel medium to add the circles to the cover, just laying them out as I see fit. I put a coat of gel medium on the cover, on the back of the circle, and on the top of the circle. I want them to be securely fastened to the book. Once I've done that, I give the whole cover a coat of gel medium and then add my smaller circles here and there. The reason I give the whole thing a coat of gel medium is because I want to shade around these circles, so I find that if I have a waterproof or a seal between the book cover and the shading that I'm doing, it gives me more flexibility in what I can use to do the shading. The gel medium's dry now, so I'm going to use my scissors to cut off the overhang. Now that I've got everything sorted, I decide that I need a bit more darkness in the background, so I'm using the Kaiser Craft Arty stamp, and once again my black Stays On ink, and just stamping randomly in the background, trying as best as I can to avoid the circles. If I had have thought of it, I could have done this step before I attached the circles, but I wasn't quite sure whether the colour was going to need it or not. Now I'm going to use my charcoal pencil to shade around the outside of all of the circles. To do this, I just use the pencil to draw a line around the outside edge, so actually on the book cover, and then use my finger to smudge that a little so that we get a sort of smudgy shading. Makes the circles stand out a little better from the background. I'll do this for all the circles. Here, all the circles are done, and now I'm going to use a Studio Arts permanent black marker, and a 0.4 is the size of the nib. And I'm just going to put some detailing on the inside, just on the inside edges of each of the circles, just to make them a bit darker. I've got a white Posca paint pen and a white Signo pen. I'm going to use the white to put a few highlights on the circles and just add a bit of a lift. I do like a border around my art journal pages, so this I'm going to use my Stabilo All pencil in black and just scribble a line around the edge and then use a wet brush to smudge that out. I don't want the border to be too heavy, so after I've used my wet brush, I use a wet one to sort of dull the border down a little, because I didn't want sort of just a solid black line. I wanted more of a shadow than a definite line. Now I'm going to use this metallic acrylic paint. I'm nearly at the end of this bottle, so I'm going to just add some water to it, give it a good shake up, and then use my fan brush to put splatters all over the page. Now it's time to attach the cover back onto the book. So I open up the spiral a little more to allow myself the room to put the cover back on, and then close the spirals up to keep the cover in place. This may have been a little easier if I had have let the gold splatters dry before I attempted to do this. Anyway, that's my book cover for today. I hope you've enjoyed my video. If you have, I'd love it if you would subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And if you would like to share my video with your friends, that would be fantastic. Thank you.